Okay, so this episode is about. Wait, what exactly is this episode about? Alright, so let me see. There's a guy with a bit of an identity issue, and there's a woman who's busy talking about guys with commitment issues, at least today. So, on one end, you could call it an identity crisis. On the other end, you can call it a commitment crisis. But is it really a crisis? I don't know. This episode is made up of misplacements. Just mostly because I don't really know where to place shit. And, there's no real central theme to everything that we're going to be talking about today. What I can only promise is that it'll be pretty interesting. There's a couple of, novel things that we're not used to hearing about. And, in the main topic, I talk about something that a lot of women seem to be going through. But all in all, for the most part, there seems to be some sort of crisis on either end. But before I can get into the crisis, I want to talk about a particularly interesting opportunity that is happening in Italy. Now, there's an Italian town that will pay you over $30,000 to move there if you're younger than the age of 40. Which, when I kind of read up on this story, first of all, I feel like this might be Europe's way of repopulating itself, but at the same time, this is a more lucrative way of repopulating an area as opposed to the people who actually do it for free, don't you think?
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
So the story reads, and I quote, "An Italian town is offering an enticing opportunity for those under 40, paying them over $30,000 to relocate to Calabria, also known as Italy's Toe. The offer comes with certain conditions, including moving within 90 days and either starting a business that benefits the local economy or filling job openings in the area. These roles are expected to be available in restaurants, cafes, and bars. Applicants can choose to receive the money in monthly installments of $1,000 over 3 years or as a lump sum. The initiative aims to match job demand with supply, and more such schemes may follow if it proves successful." End quote. Now, I don't know if this is just me that's thinking about this, but I personally feel like these are the key ingredients that are needed to make an interesting porno. Now, I know there's some people that are like, "Denver, where the fuck is your mind going? You're losing your shits." But just let me cook over here, alright? Now, this place is referred to as Italy's Toe. So technically, if you have a foot fetish, alright? I'm just saying, if you have a foot fetish, this might seem like a particularly interesting idea. But more so when you think about it, the whole idea of filling in the job openings or starting a business that benefits the local economy, there's room for you to do that and still shag a couple of people here and there, which actually benefits the town as a whole. Because when you think about it, you can technically go there and just be the full package Johnny Sins. You will be the plumber, the electrician, the mechanic, the barista, you will be the chef. And the thing is, all you have to do is do shit like, if you're the barista, you're going to get your tip from one of the ladies' houses. If it's plumbing, you go and you fix those pipes and you lay some pipe. At the end of the day, you have a people that are happier because you are Johnny sinning your way through the place and you are contributing to the local economy, which means that they will even be happier, thus meaning they can work more, thus meaning they can contribute even more to the local economy. Like, fellas, if you kind of think about it, this is your opportunity. And especially if you're a black man, like, come on, bruh. Like, that saying. Once you go black, whatever the hell it is that people used to finish that statement with might just be the one to help you here. But then again, some people have accused Italians of being racist, so I don't know if that's the best idea. And also, there's a 90-day notice towards moving there, of which this post was posted up in the beginning of November. So I guess you have till maybe the end of Jan, if I'm not wrong. But all in all, time is of the essence. So if you want to go there, then you should probably start planning. And if you do actually go there, I hope you don't stop listening to this podcast that gives very, very essential advice and shows you more than one way to improve the economy. That is hosted by a man who should have started the episode off in a less than horny manner by saying, "Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, a podcast where I get to talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who does not have a foot fetish, but if you take him to Italy's too, he might exercise a couple of others. He's a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. And I have questions. After making all of these Johnny Sins jokes, I'm actually now starting to wonder if porn stars actually have a bad day at work. Like, what's a porn star's bad day at work? Because either way, you're getting home and the whole idea is, at work, there was some screwing that was happening. So, like, what's a bad day for them? Is it like one of those times where you're doing a scene, you're hitting it from the back, and then, she was supposed to queef, but, suddenly she farted and it suddenly came out with some dookie and it was caught on camera and you had already nutted and now you guys have to redo the scene again because, they caught the dookie on you and that's not gonna look good for the viewers. Like, does it mean that now when you go home and you're asked, hey baby, how was your day at work? You're like, it was shitty. Like, it's a little bit hard to say because you wouldn't really know what a good or a bad day is for a porn star, because either way, there's someone that's getting screwed and there's a pretty good chance that porn star is being screwed either by another porn star or by the company that's giving them the gig. Either way, I do kind of feel for them. I recognize that it is a profession for some people like many others. And there's definitely a lot of screwing going around. But all in all, that's not what I decided to do this episode on, because there's a bunch of other shit I need to talk about. And there's a main topic with a bit of a serious discussion that needs to be done. But before I can get into that, I need to first discuss a story that I saw on the news sometime towards the end of last week. Now, the story is of a man who was supposedly robbed by a man who posed as a female dancer, and he ended up losing around 145 grand amongst a bunch of other things. Now, I'm going to read the story for you real quick so that I can get into it, because there was a couple of things that I found to be particularly peculiar in this entire story. So let me just read it. So it says, and I quote, "A man was arrested and arraigned in court on Friday, December the 15th, after posing as a woman at a nightclub in Kayole, Nairobi, to trick a data analyst into drugging and robbing him of his valuables. The data analyst was reported to have lost 8,000 shillings in cash, as well as 5 mobile phones and a pair of shoes worth 7,000, among other items valued at 145,000 bob. The suspect, who works as a dancer, was accused of stealing the items from the data analyst after they met in a club. The victim was having a drink at the bar when he was approached by a quote-unquote woman and asked to dance with him, to which he agreed. The two later left the club and headed for his home, where they would spend the night. However, when the two got home, the suspect, who had been posing as the female dancer, asked them to continue drinking and served the victim wine. The data analyst told the police during investigation that while he was drinking, he began to pass out but could hear the suspect making calls to unknown people requesting for a motorcyclist. The victim woke up the following day feeling dizzy and exhausted and discovered that the woman was missing from the house and his items stolen, prompting him to report the incident to Kayole police station. The police tracked down the suspect to his home and arrested him, upon which the victim learned that the person he had taken home for the night was a man. The suspect was arraigned before Senior Principal Magistrate Agnes Mwangi of the Makadara Law Courts and charged with stupefying to commit an offence contrary to Section 230 of the Penal Code after he allegedly administered a drug to subdue the victim. He was also charged with theft and handling of stolen property contrary to Section 268 version 1 of the Penal Code. Prosecutors accused him of dishonestly retaining a mobile phone and a set of keys belonging to the data analyst when he was arrested at his home in Dandora, Nairobi on Saturday, December the 9th. He was also accused of retaining the items with the intent to steal, knowing or having reason to believe that they were stolen property. The suspect, however, denied all the charges. The magistrate had registered that the suspect was transgender and thus was unsure of where to detain him. She asked him why he wanted to be detained in the women's or men's prison. However, prison officials told the court that the suspect had been held in a men's prison in the past. Nonetheless, he was released on a 200,000 shillings bail with no option for cash bail. End quote. Okay, now, when I kind of read this story, like the whole, female dancer that was supposedly a male bit, I don't know. I kind of felt like there was a bit of cap here, because to be very honest, in as much as yes, there could be some truth in what's being said, I wouldn't be surprised if dude knew that this was a dude posing as a chick and was willing to take the chance with a quote-unquote transgender. And I know that there's someone that's gonna be out there saying, these are things that happen in the West, not here. This is Kenya, we don't have such interests. And if anyone believes that, what I can tell you is, I know for a fact that there's a lot of people out here with a lot of very secret kinks, fantasies, and fetishes, and transgenders just happen to be on that list, alright? But also, even though I'm willing to admit that maybe dude was drunk and beauty was in the eyes of the beer holder and shit, still, like, the fact that the magistrate was registering this person as transgender seemed a little bit odd to me, because I didn't think that amongst the genders, especially with the last census, we had anything beyond male, female, and intersex. So that one was particularly new. Then also the whole question of should we send him to a men's or a women's prison seemed particularly interesting, because I personally felt like dude is fucked either way, because if the guy goes to a women's prison, there's a bunch of those women that are gonna get impregnated real quick. Dude's balls are gonna get tired real quick, and if he goes to a men's prison, his asshole is gonna be tired real quick. But the most interesting part was how the prison officers just came through and they were like, yep, this nigga's been in a men's prison before. Let's just send him here. And the way these guys just had to do that, it's almost as though they were also planning for it. It's like they probably knew that when the male inmates see this dude and they know of the story, it's gonna be like fucking a woman for the first time all over again. Like, these niggas aren't gonna hold back. They're gonna put everything in that one. But hey, all in all, at least a thief was caught, so at least there should be fewer people that are rushing to do the crime right about now. So I'm gonna leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of today. Now, not too long ago while I was on Reddit, I actually stumbled upon a particularly interesting post. Now, the post was titled The Boyfriend Experience, and it was more or less about a woman who was talking about her experiences with guys and the fact that guys don't seem to be committing. And there were some very interesting thoughts on it, and of course, when you see a situation like this, there's definitely going to be guys who are like blah blah, it depends on the kind of guy that you're with. But when I read it and I sort of thought about it for a quick bit, I realized that this isn't necessarily a specific type of guy issue or babe issue, or even something that is very niche. This is actually something that a lot of women seem to be facing right now. But let me just read the post so that I can get into what I commented on it, why I gave my comments and my thoughts on the entire thing. So it says, and I quote, "Now, if you're a single babe like me, obviously you go out on dates here and there. So sometimes you meet eligible bachelors. Also applies if you've got friends who are bachelors. They treat you well, etc, etc, but they don't want to settle down for some reason. Now, according to me, experiencing such is worse than being in a toxic relationship." End quote. Now, with that said, definitely there were guys that were coming in and they were like, oh, why is this a problem? You're getting all of these things for free and you don't need the commitment. And I could get why there were so many people that weren't understanding that. And there were one or two women that did pop out and say, I understand the experience. I have gone through it so many times and I'm so tired of it, because it's like you're going on date after date after date, but it's like it's not going anywhere. And the guys don't seem to be wanting to pop the question and, desire to have you for a long time and settle down. Now, when I read a couple of the comments, I kind of got a little bit tempted and ended up throwing in my comment there where I said, and I quote, "First off, I can get how that sucks for a woman, especially since mate retention is important for y'all. The sad part is, this is now common. The best you can hope for is that you give enough of an impression to the guy that he feels like he'd not want to let you go. Also, as long as you're with a guy you want a relationship with, don't settle for less than that. Otherwise, you'll be brought into the merry-go-round known as situationships." End quote. And when I kind of wrote that, I sort of tried to just summarize everything, but it's because I knew that if I was to start writing everything I thought, or at least my entire understanding of the entire thing, it would seem a little bit much for someone to just read at one go. Because the reality of it is, this situation, these sentiments that this babe had when she was making this post are something that a lot of women are going through. The whole thing of men not committing has become such a common thing nowadays, and there has to be reasons why. And of course, I've had the whole why aren't guys getting into commitments, and I've had those discussions, and I have thrown quite a bit of blame to the women here and there. But I figured maybe in this particular case, maybe for this one instance, I will not throw any blame to the women. This isn't anything to bash on women or to say, oh, if women didn't do this, we wouldn't do that. No, let me just try and look at it as from the guy's side, where are our issues in regards to us not committing? And I came up with around 4 main problems that kind of cause this entire situation to be what it is. And the first one is the choice problem, the second one is the ideals problem, the third is the opinions problem, and the fourth one is the situationship problem. Now, I'm going to break each and every one of them down so that at least, there's some understanding to it. So with the choice problem, I feel like the choice problem actually and the situationship problem are probably the ones that might carry the most weight in regards to the entire thing. But for the choice problem, it kind of refers to the whole illusion of choice and the fact that too many people feel like they have too many choices, and that's prevented them from actually choosing properly. It's kind of like the crutch that comes with having too many options. Because when you think about it, sometimes when you don't have that many options, it's easier for you to choose. But if someone all of a sudden presents you with an infinite amount of options, you're not happier because you have more choice. You actually kind of feel like you're a little bit more weighed down because there's so much option that it's becoming hard to choose. And that's something that has been labeled onto a lot of women, and a lot of people that talk about it say, oh, women ever since social media and dating apps came, they feel like they have this limitless number of options, blah blah blah. But people don't talk about how men might actually feel the same thing. Because when you see a guy and he's following a couple of fine babes on IG, the guy has Tinder as well, he can also have the same problem. And especially when you're stacking up dough as a guy, there's a lot more women that will give you a chance. There's a lot more women that will be willing to let you hit it, that will be trying to get with you. So of course it now suddenly feels like you have all this choice, and now as a result you're not really finding one that you are going to choose to stick with. Because if you have so much choice, then you're going to increase your criteria so that you can filter more. And the more you increase that just becomes a little bit of an additional problem, because there's one that's going to be deficient in one thing, then you go for the other one, then they're deficient in something else, and the problems sort of just continue like that. Which kind of leads you into the ideals problem, which is another problem that guys have when they're trying to choose someone to settle down with, where you sort of try and look at the character and the values and the morals of the person that you're trying to be with, so that you can see if they're a particularly good option. Now, way back in the day, you knew that you could attach certain actions and certain behaviors that you'd see with women, and even with women looking at men, to certain character values and traits that you'd particularly find either desirable or undesirable in a certain partner. So things like, does she go to church? How decently does she dress? Does she have tattoos? Does she consume alcohol? Stuff like that were things that guys would just use, and it would show them, okay, so she does this means that she's a good babe. She does that means that maybe she's not the best option for me. We go to the same church and she participates, that makes a good option. But in today's day and age, that doesn't work, because the actions don't necessarily mimic the character values and the morals. So for example, you might find a babe that goes to church and sings in the choir, might seem like a good option. Then you suddenly realize that she's the most hypocritical person and she treats people like a stack of shit. Or you'll find that the babe that dresses decently is out here in the streets and she's circulating between like 3-4 niggas and she's hoeing around. Or you might find the babe with the tattoo is like the sweetest person ever. She just has tattoos. And the process of trying to differentiate the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff, it can sometimes be a lot for a guy. So as you're busy trying to find this one out, you're not entirely sure if her going to church makes her a good person, her not going to church, her being an atheist or an agnostic will affect her capability to have good morals and values. You don't know if her going out clubbing means that she's in the streets or not. So the whole idea of committing to someone, and you can see some of these traits, can be a little bit hard for a lot of guys, which now gets reinforced by the opinions problem. Like nowadays, and I'll even blame my ilk for this, because a bunch of us guys online that talk about relationships, hell, even the ones that don't talk about relationships and just spew shit, we've messed up the market. Because nowadays, like, everything is a red flag. Because you see a babe who has tattoos, apparently it's a red flag, impulsive behavior. Or if you see a babe that doesn't dress a certain way, that's a red flag. If you see a babe that doesn't act like this, it's a red flag. And it's something that's been slapped on guys, but it's also slapped on women. And people are seeing red flags for everything. So if your favorite content creator is busy saying that such and such and such behaviors are a red flag, all of a sudden there's great people who might have, a much lighter version or an example of that sort of behavior that are being written off simply because someone is thinking that it's a red flag. And some of those things can be a little bit extreme, especially for us guys, because guys are out here busy giving each other some of the shittiest advice in terms of relationships and dating, where it's like, don't commit to a woman, marriage is a trap for men, you need to get a woman pregnant first, then decide if you want to settle down with her or not. Like, you find that there's all of these bits and pieces of opinions which are framed as advice, which just complicate things for a lot of guys, give people some very unrealistic standards on partners to date. Like, for example, telling every man that they should be marrying a virgin or some shit, which is like less than 2% of the current population. Not unless if you're going to people who are like below the age of like 16, 17 and all, which not only makes the selection process that much harder, but gives a lot of guys some very unrealistic expectations and unrealistic desires from the potential woman that they'd want to settle down with. So it discounts the reality for some virtual reality BS that some people online decided to tell you a good woman is supposed to be like. But even though we were to take that one aside and, remove a lot of the guys that just don't seem to commit, the other problem that seems to be happening right now, which is affecting quite a lot of Kenyan guys and influencing them not to date, is the situationship problem. Now, this one is probably a massive issue for quite a lot of people, just mostly because there's no real incentive for a guy to move from a situationship to a relationship if he can get a lot of the benefits of the relationship without the extended commitment and responsibility of it while he's in a situationship. Like, you kind of think about it, if the guy is, that much of an asshole, he doesn't have to stay committed to you because you're in a situationship, so he can just argue that there was nothing exclusive. He can be conveniently unavailable because, if you start complaining about him not being available, he'll now start asking you why you're making so much noise and there's nothing official, or, why you nagging him like you're his mother. He can practically come and get the goods because, if he sweet talks you and you're in the fields for him, then it's not like you'll tell him no. And after all of that, the dude can just bounce and move on to the next one without really having to cry that he dumped a girlfriend. Like, at the end of the day, he'll feel a lot less worse because it's not like he had to end a relationship to get into another situationship. He just moves situationships and he'll just say, me and her used to have a thing. And then, story closed and the guy just gets to move on. So at the end of it, like, a lot of guys are very okay. They're very willing to get into a situationship, but not very willing to move into a relationship, because if they can get this lightened version of a relationship called a situationship, which gives them a lot less downside, then they'll definitely take it. All right. So when you kind of look at it, if the guy is thinking about commitment and has a criteria, then on one end, it's like he has so many options and so many criteria that he's going to have a problem choosing. But in case he wants to try things out and see if things are good or bad, then he'll just get into a situationship and not have to commit. Meaning that on both ends, the guy isn't really going to commit and fully get into a relationship and all, which I can understand is very annoying for a lot of women, because mate retention for women is nearly, if not even more valuable than the idea of having a body count is for men. Because at the end of the day, it's things that give you a certain amount of social and also intrinsic value when you kind of think of it as an individual. So to conclude all of this, the unfortunate reality is that we now have two sets of guys. There is one set of guys that has been indoctrinated and has so much choice that they feel like they have all the time in the world and they have so many women that they can pretty much choose to their heart's content and they will not settle for anything less. On the other hand, there's a bunch of guys that, of course, because they don't have to take the relationship, they can get relationship light, aka the situationship. They would much rather go for that because it is a lot less work for them, and it's not that they're afraid of committing, it's just that they have a much better option that doesn't require as much work or as much responsibility. All in all, if I was to give any piece of advice to a lot of the women today that are going through this issue, I'd probably just repeat the same thing that I said on the post, which was, as long as you're with a guy that you want a relationship with, don't settle for less than that, or else you'll be brought into the merry-go-round known as situationships. So essentially, just ask for the commitment and don't take anything less than the commitment that you're asking for. Otherwise, you will end up being thrown into this whole situationship thing, which will be incredibly hard to turn into an actual relationship today for a lot of y'all. So you better be ready to ask that question, of which if you're not ready to do it and you're like, can never be me, then be ready to be taken through this merry-go-round of relationships, or, stay out in the single market waiting for someone to actually pop that question to you, of which a lot of you might end up staying quite a bit of time. But if you do eventually decide to, or if you've already been a part of this whole I don't mind asking for the commitment side of things, then you can obviously go to the Approaching Guys 101 episode for a couple more details that should definitely increase your chances of getting into an actual relationship. Although then again, I might be wrong about this entire thing, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On Twitter, it is at Bagakatd. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.